arrived in the US in September 2021 as part of a temporary resettlement program for individuals who had assisted the US Armed Forces in Afghanistan. President Trump, in a televised address to the nation, vowed the perpetrator of the attack would pay a very heavy price. His defense secretary has ordered the deployment of an additional 500 National Guard soldiers to Washington. President Trump was in Florida at the time of the attack for the Thanksgiving holiday today. The two victims of the attack, a man and a woman who were shot at point-blank range, remain in a critical condition in a DC hospital. Sean Whelan, RTE News, Washington.
At least 55 people have been killed in a major fire which engulfed a number of apartment buildings in Hong Kong. More than 270 people are still unaccounted for. 3 construction company executives have been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter connected to flammable materials that may have allowed the fire to spread quickly. Officials say the fire, which has been classified a level 5 blaze, the most serious level in Hong Kong, is now under control. Pope Leo is set to begin the first foreign trip of his papacy when he lands in Turkey this morning, beginning a 6-day tour, which will also include a visit to Lebanon. On his first day, the Pope will meet President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Ankara and address diplomats before heading to Istanbul later in the day. A status yellow wind warning has been issued for counties Donegal and Mayo from this afternoon. Met Éireann has forecast gusty southwesterly winds that will be strong to gale force. The warning will come into place at 4 p.m. today and will remain in place until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
RTE Radio 1 weather with Grant. Self-building, take efficiencies to new levels with a fully integrated Grant heating system. Think heating, think Grant. Visit grant.ie.
Mostly cloudy to begin today with further rain, drizzle and mist. A band of more persistent rain will extend from the west this morning and early afternoon, followed by sunny spells and isolated showers. Highest temperatures of 11 to 15 degrees in strengthening southwest winds. And there's a warning that southwesterly winds will reach gale force 8 at times this morning on Irish coastal waters from Sline Head to Rossin Point to Malin Head. Southwesterly winds will reach gale force 8 or strong gale force 9 and gusty later on Irish coastal waters from Valentia to Bloody Foreland to Carlingford Lough and on the North Irish Sea. And that's all from the newsroom for now.
Today with David McCullough on RTE Radio 1, sponsored by Cat & Carry Kitchens, an award-winning guaranteed Irish company. catandcarrykitchens.ie.
Men to look after their heart health. How more and more people are feeling sober curious this Christmas.
The emphasis is on the fun and the dancing and the social side of things rather than the alcohol.
Weird.
Downsizing from the empty nest, but could older people will feel pressurised to sell the family home? Also, the cab auction, bargains galore as the proceeds of crime go on sale. The latest on that horrific tower block fire in Hong Kong, and we'll have book recommendations from our librarians. You get in touch on WhatsApp 0870 32 32 32, text 51551. You can also email today dmc@rte.ie. But first this morning, I'm joined in the studio by the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, who yesterday announced changes to immigration policy, including charges for direct provision accommodation and new income thresholds for family reunification. Good morning, Minister. Thanks indeed for joining us. Before we get into the details, perhaps, of some of the specific provisions, could we look at the overall picture? Is the aim of this simply to make Ireland a less attractive destination?
Morning, David. I suppose the aim of it in the first instance is to acknowledge that immigration has had very positive benefits for Ireland. That's why so many people have come to Ireland as well. It's a very attractive place for people to come. And I just want to acknowledge the very important role that migrants have played coming to Ireland and the contribution they have in society. I also, as Minister, can't ignore the fact, however, that our population is increasing by 1.6% per annum, which is 7 times the EU average. And also that population increase, the rate of increase, is being driven by immigration. So every country is entitled to set down its own rules in respect of immigration. In fact, it's one of the signs of the sovereignty of our country that you do have your own rules in respect of it. Ireland has very open rules. We welcome people in, but it is important, I think, that we put in place rules that set out very clearly what's required if people want to come into Ireland.
Okay, but a lot of people say that you're focusing on people coming here to seek asylum, who are a tiny proportion of the immigration that is driving that population growth.
I disagree. If you look at the proposal I announced yesterday, the first proposal that I referred to was in respect of people who are here on work visas and family reunification for them.
Talk about that in a moment.
That's the first thing. Secondly, if you turn of you look at the citizenship proposals that I announced yesterday, that applies to everyone, whether they've obtained residency in Ireland through an asylum application or indeed if they're working here in work permits. And thirdly, there's also the people who've come here on temporary protection, which is different, I suppose, to the international protection application process.
That's Ukrainian.
That's Ukrainians who come here. So the package of measures announced yesterday, it involves a whole series of people. But you're right in identifying that there is a series of avenues which come into Ireland there's very many through student visas. Myself and Always Minister for Further Education will be working on that, and there are many different
When you say you're going to be working on that, you mean you're going to reduce the number of students coming here? The universities won't be very happy about that.
But I suppose you have to look at the numbers. Like in terms of the numbers coming into Ireland, we issue around 60,000 student permits a year. Then there are people, I suppose, who come here on work visas to work in the critical skills sector. Then there are people who come here from other EU countries or the UK. Then we have people who come here through family reunification, and then that's before we get to people seeking asylum or indeed people seeking temporary protection.
Which kind of proves the point that people seeking temporary protection or seeking asylum are a very, very small proportion of the overall increase.
Well, let's look at it in terms of the numbers, in terms of the people who came here from other EU countries or the UK last year. That was around 32,000. Last year, the people who came here looking for asylum was 18,500. People who came last year looking for temporary protection, 10,000. People who were granted student permits, 60,000. People who came here in terms of granted work visas from my department, 12,500. So it's not the majority, but it's a significant percentage of the numbers of people coming into Ireland.
10%.
It is. Well, it's
gone down this year.
Yeah, it's gone down this year. It's about 10%, but the measures I announced yesterday affect the people who are here from non-EEA countries who are work permits.
Yes, I appreciate that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But a lot of people say that the strictest tightening of the rules relates to people coming from.
Okay, but can I also emphasise this? Like, it would be a denial of reality if I was to say that people seeking asylum isn't a more complicated and contentious issue than other people who come in here. But I suppose if people are coming in here claiming asylum, we have obligations. We have to provide accommodation. That means me getting centres around the country where they can be accommodated. And secondly, we have to put in place a processing system and an appeal system that is very complicated. And I suppose thirdly, like in terms of visas that I issue, I can control that because I assess people in advance before they come in. When it comes to people claiming asylum, as they're entitled to, they can just arrive and claim asylum. So it's a less controlled aspect of the immigration system.
And therefore you want to make it less attractive to come to this country for those people.
Well, I have to say, and I can't ignore the reality, like in terms of the numbers who are being processed for asylum, at first instance over 80% are being rejected, and then when you get to appeal, about 70% of the rejected appeal and about 70% again are rejected. So the overwhelming majority of people who come to Ireland claiming asylum are refused, and I can't ignore
Well, about 60% are refused at the end of the process, 40% are approved.
Again, more favourable from my point of view than in terms of what you're saying there.
Well, I don't have a point of view. I'm only asking you questions.
Well, in terms of the statistics, if you get into it, over 80% of individuals who apply at first instance are refused. Then approximately 70% of those who are refused appeal, and when it comes to that appeal process, between 60 and 70% are rejected. So listen, whatever the statistics are, the significant majority of people will apply for asylum have their applications rejected.
Now, you've touched on the systemic problems that are faced. I think everybody accepts that the main problem is the backlog in cases. I think the figure last July, I haven't seen more recent figures, but last July there were 33,853 applications at some point in the process. I don't know whether that's gone down since then. And if resources have been put into the system to try and speed it up, so, and obviously we have obligations under the EU Asylum and Migration Pact. Now, you, in an answer to a dull question in July, set out some targets for what you hope to achieve by the end of this year. So I'd just be interested to see whether we're getting there. The International Protection Office last year made decisions in 14,000 cases. You were hoping that by the end of this year, in a month's time, that would be up to 25,000. Are you going to hit that target?
No, I'd say I'll hit around over 20,000, 20 to 21,000, which is significantly better than
Oh,
last year.
absolutely, yeah. But it's still not making your target. The other thing was the Appeals Tribunal. I think you said, or it was stated that they were making about 200 determinations a month, and that needed to get up to about 1,500 determinations a month. You may not have the figure there, but is it moving in the right direction?
Yeah, as of the 2nd of November, there were 5,146 appeals completed by IPAT, but there are a lot of appeals on hand for them. They have around nearly 16,000, 17,000 appeals in hand, and we're putting further resources into that as well.
When the Migration Pact comes into force in the middle of next year, is it?
It comes on the 12th of June next year.
Okay, and we have to, by
We
that
have to have a
stage,
system in place whereby we're going to process the majority of applications between 3 to 6 months, and at present we're doing that. We've started on a pilot basis for 15 countries. People coming from 15 countries are now being treated as though the pact had operated, and we're getting them determined, processed, and appeals dealt with within a period of 3 months.
So you're happy that
So it is working. Now, obviously, the significant numbers of other people coming in terms of the applicants, which are going to have to be processed on the same basis, is going to put more pressure on the system. But we've put huge resources into it, and I'm confident that we'll be in a position where we're able to process the numbers come the 12th of June next.
okay, but there'll still be a backlog though.
Well, there will still be a backlog under the old system. We'll still have people going through IPAT. Like, we're going to have a new appeals body that's going to be set up that will hear the appeals very promptly, but it's still going to take a period of time to get through the appeals which are there at present.
Okay, we had Professor Kira Smith at the University of Galway on this programme yesterday, and she described what's happening across Europe in relation to migration and asylum seekers as a race to the bottom. Do you accept that?
I disagree with that, and that is a political point. I know Dr. Smith is a legal academic, but that's a political point. In terms of what is happening, certainly from an Irish perspective, I'm trying to ensure that we have a rules-based system that operates effectively in Ireland. There are two interests that I have to take into account. Obviously, if people come to Ireland and claim asylum, their application and their position needs to be considered and taken into account by me. But separately, I've also got to take into account the general interests of the Irish public in terms of ensuring that, you know, applications are dealt with effectively, and the public have a belief and a conviction that the system is operating efficiently and effectively. And that means that people look at it and say, okay, listen, we have a rules-based system in Ireland. If you come in, you apply, you have your application processed. If you're entitled to stay, and we're a very generous country, you can stay, you have the benefits of other Irish residents here. But if you're refused, there's consequences and you have to leave.
Okay, let's talk about family reunification, because that is one of the big changes that you announced yesterday. You're making it more difficult for migrants, whether they're people granted asylum or those here on work permits, to bring family members here. In order to bring children here, you have to be earning €44,300 for one child, €54,200 for two children, €64,200 for three children. Now, at the moment, the minimum wage is around $28,000. So for many jobs, for care workers, for food production, for the hospitality industry, jobs are vital to our society. We are effectively saying you can come here and work, but you can't know what family life.
Well, I have to look again at the numbers of people coming in. And again, these are people who are not asylum seekers. If you look at the numbers in respect of the work permit people, the non-EEA family reunification, 22,000 people came under family reunification last year. I suppose one of the characteristics of family reunification is that in many instances people are coming in who are either minor children or dependent parents. And they're people who are required to be cared for, and they're people who, if the sponsor bringing them in isn't going to be able to look after them, the state's going to have to look after them. So we have to take into account the financial cost that this is going to have on the state, and that is why, in respect of the rules that were announced yesterday in respect to family reunification for both non-EEA and indeed asylum seekers, there has to be self-sufficiency applied. And in order to bring somebody in who's a member of your family, you're going to have to be able to show that you'll be able to support them yourselves. And I think that is a fair proposal. Maybe you think it's unfair on the person who's applying for reunification, but I also have to take into account the interests of the Irish public in terms of the cost of bringing people in who the state then ultimately ends up responsible for.
Okay, but I mean, talk about the individual, the care worker. We're saying to them, come to this country, care for us in our old age, but we're going to care for you. We're not going to allow you to have a normal.
I know, but I'm not forcing people to come to Ireland.
Well, we need those people to come to Ireland, or we won't have care
I know,
homes.
but can I just say to you, nobody's forcing people to come here. People are coming here because there are work opportunities here for those who are coming under the non-EEA avenue. And they've made the decision themselves to come here in the same way as Irish people today make decisions to go to other countries. And just because you make a decision to go to another country doesn't mean that you have an automatic entitlement to bring your whole family with you. Like, that's a reasonable position.
Okay, but people, so doctors, engineers, people who are deemed to be critical to the economy, they can bring their families. They can have a normal family life.
Well,
But the care worker can't.
Family reunification is an issue that applies, and the policy I put out yesterday is family reunification in respect of non-EEA members, people who are here on work permits, and they have to comply with certain requirements in order to bring family members here. And the reason is because it is a standard procedure throughout the European Union. Actually, one of the things I noticed is that Ireland is one of the few countries in Europe that doesn't require you to be able to prove that you'll have suitable accommodation available for somebody if they come here. Like, I can't ignore the fact.
But are you planning to introduce that?
Yeah, well, you will have to be able to establish that you have suitable accommodation for the person you're asking to bring into Ireland. I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Care homes, I'm sure you're well aware, care homes have difficulties in getting staff. They say it's a continuing problem. Could there come a point where you or whoever your successor may be in the Department of Justice is going to have to say, well, actually, care home workers are essential. We are going to have to allow them to have family reunification, or they won't come and work here.
Well, some people make decisions to come to Ireland for work, to work for a variety of reasons. And the main reason, I suspect, is because there's employment opportunities here. That's the driving motivator. I don't know the extent to which bringing families with them is a contributing factor. For those who just want to be with their families, I suspect there are people who probably won't come here. I suspect they'll want to stay where their families are. But, like, we're not closing it off. We're changing it, and we're entitled to change it when you look at the statistics in terms of last year, the numbers of people coming in. And family reunification, as I say, it doesn't just apply to asylum applicants. This will be applying to individuals who are coming here on work permits. Family reunification is different because it brings in dependent people. And if the sponsor isn't going to be responsible for them, the state's going to be.
I know you have a job to do and you have to follow the rules and all the rest of it, but we've heard stories, we've read stories about people working maybe long hours in a nursing home or whatever, whose children are far away from them, and that is obviously having a really serious effect on them on a human level. What do you feel about that?
Well, I feel for those people as well, but, like, it is an autonomous decision that people make to come to Ireland in the same way as many people at present in Ireland and previously made decisions to migrate and go abroad to either other part of America or the UK. The immigration, it's not the part of the job that I want to spend most of my time talking about, being frank with you. But I'm Minister for Justice, and I'm the minister that has the levers that can try to control the numbers that are coming in through the issue of visas, through policies on family reunification, through the rules in respect of international protection. So, like, the population, David, is growing at 1.6%. It's 7 times the EU average. It's being driven predominantly by immigration. If I want to slow it down, if the government wants to slow it down, I need to make some changes.
Let's talk about the accommodations charges. So international protection applicants who are working are going to be asked to contribute, or going to be made to contribute, between 10 and 40% of their weekly income towards the accommodation provided by the state, even if it's a tent.
Well, people who come to Ireland, they cannot work if they apply for asylum for a period of 6 months, okay? So where we have difficulties in providing accommodation, we put people in the first instance into tents. The vast majority of IPAS accommodation and I've been around and seen it, is of good quality, much higher than what's in other European Union countries.
Well, HIGGS report in March said there was
shows how seriously we take our obligation to ensure that there is good accommodation available. We have a requirement under the Material Conditions Directive to provide accommodation. That applies to every other European Union country as well. I can tell you, Ireland provides a much higher quality of accommodation than the vast majority of other EU countries. At present, we're accommodating 33,000 people in IPAS. Last September, we did an assessment and were able to identify that there's around 7,600 people in IPAS who could make a contribution as they are working. I think it's reasonable that if somebody is working, that they make a contribution to their accommodation.
okay. The Irish Times reporting this morning that the charges won't apply to people living in direct provision who have been granted refugee status. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. And the reason we contemplated that, if you get status and you're in IPAS, you have to move on.
Yeah.
You can't stay there. I'm not in the business of being a landlord and providing accommodation.
Yeah.
And there's about 5,000 people in IPAS who have refugee status and are moving on. And we've moved on already this year. 4,000 people have been granted status. They're in IPAS and they've moved on, got their own thing. And once you get status, you have access to the full range of housing supports available to all Irish residents. So I'm not in the business of being a landlord providing accommodation for people who have status to be in Ireland.
So the people who are entitled to state accommodation have to pay for it, and the people you want to move out of state accommodation don't have to pay for it. I'm
moving
sorry,
them out. I'm moving them out of state accommodation. They're not allowed
but
to
if they have
stay.
to pay for the accommodation, would they not be more inclined to move out?
But David, they're granted international protection on a day. We then give them a bit of time to organise their affairs so they can move out, and they are being moved out on a continuous basis. However, when it comes to applicants, the law is there at present. If you're an applicant working, and very many people who are international protection applicants are working, it's only reasonable that you make a small contribution towards your accommodation costs.
Okay, how much is this system going to cost to set up and operate?
Well, the indicative estimated costs for an end-to-end provider are around 1.6 million euro in the first year, with an estimated annual running cost of approximately 740,000.
So this isn't going to be raising revenue?
That's not the objective of it. The objective of it is to try to